There's a version of you that nobody gets to see, the unedited one, the one with actual opinions, real boundaries, and zero interest in performing for people who wouldn't return the favor. You keep that version locked away, safe, hidden. The question is, why? There's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from shrinking yourself repeatedly for people who never asked you to grow in the first place. It doesn't arrive all at once. It creeps in slowly, in the silences, after you've agreed to something you hated, in the mirror, on the mornings when you can't quite meet your own eyes. The Stoics saw this clearly. Marcus Aurelius, a man who ruled an empire and still wrestled with his own inner world, understood that the greatest threat to a human life wasn't an enemy at the gates. It was the slow surrender of self-respect from within. Seneca warned that when you live entirely for others' comfort, you quietly disappear. Epictetus, who began his life as a slave, taught something that still cuts to the bone. No man is free who is not master of himself. 6 lessons. Ancient wisdom. 1 non-negotiable truth. Before we dive in, drop the word worthy in the comments. 1 word. A reminder to yourself that you showed up today for a reason. You were never meant to lower yourself for anyone, and starting right now, you won't. Lesson 1. The first Stoic lesson begins with what sounds like a simple question, but it will change the way you move through every room, every conversation, every relationship you have. What is actually yours to control? Not their opinion of you, not whether they approve of your choices or validate your worth, not whether they stay, whether they understand, or whether they ever come around to seeing you clearly. None of that belongs to you. Epictetus called this the dichotomy of control, the fundamental Stoic distinction between what lies within your power and what lies beyond it. And he was ruthless about it. Everything external, he said, is not up to us. Your reputation, other people's judgments, their emotional reactions, these are not your property, and treating them as though they are is the beginning of every unnecessary suffering you will ever experience. What is yours? Your choices, your values, your effort, your response. When you lower yourself for someone, adjusting your principles, silencing your perspective, shrinking your presence, you are almost always doing it to influence something that was never in your control to begin with. You're trying to manage their feelings, secure their approval, or avoid their disappointment, and in doing so, you hand them the steering wheel of your own self-worth. The Stoics would call this a profound confusion of categories. You've surrendered a real thing, your dignity, in exchange for a phantom thing, someone else's momentary approval. That trade never balances. It never will, because even when you succeed, even when the approval comes, it arrives already contaminated by the knowledge of what you gave up to get it. Think about the last time you compromised something important about yourself to keep the peace. Maybe you swallowed a perspective you believed in deeply. Maybe you agreed to something that quietly violated your own values, and afterward, even if everything went smoothly, even if they seemed pleased, something inside you felt off. That feeling wasn't guilt. It was your inner compass registering the cost of the trade. Marcus Aurelius called that inner compass the hegemonikon, the ruling faculty of the mind, the part of you that knows without needing to be told when you've betrayed yourself. It doesn't shout. It simply registers the discrepancy between who you are and how you just behaved. Here's the practice. Before you bend, pause. Ask yourself, am I doing this because it aligns with my values, or because I'm afraid of what happens if I don't? That single question, asked honestly, is enough to stop you from giving away what was never yours to bargain with in the first place. Control what is yours. Release what isn't. That's where self-respect begins. Lesson 2. There is a version of you that has spent years, maybe decades, waiting for someone to confirm that you're enough, waiting for the promotion that would mean you'd made it, the relationship where you finally feel chosen, the friendship where you feel truly seen. And in that waiting, you've done things, adjusted things, performed things, all in quiet pursuit of a verdict that keeps getting postponed. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "Confine yourself to the present." But there's a deeper current running beneath those words. He wasn't just talking about time, he was talking about source. Stop outsourcing the present moment experience of your own worth to a future event or another person's conclusion about you. Your value isn't a hypothesis waiting to be confirmed. It exists right now, independent of whether anyone sees it, names it, or celebrates it. This is genuinely hard to internalize in a world that runs on external metrics: followers, likes, titles, salaries, social validation. We've been conditioned since childhood to tie our worth to performance and approval. So when the Stoics say your value is intrinsic, it can sound almost naive, but consider the alternative. If your worth depends on constant external confirmation, then every time someone withdraws their approval, part of you disappears with it. That's not living. That's auditioning. Indefinitely. And the audition never ends because the casting director keeps changing. Here's something worth sitting with. The people in your life who seem most comfortable in their own skin, who don't scramble for validation, who don't collapse when criticized, who don't light up differently based on who's watching. They haven't found some secret supply of external affirmation. They've simply stopped needing it as the primary currency of their self-worth. That shift didn't happen because life got easier for them. It happened because they made a decision, quietly and deliberately, to locate their sense of value somewhere that couldn't be revoked. Seneca said, "Retire into yourself as much as possible, not as isolation, as return. Come back to the place inside you that existed before anyone's opinion of you did. Before the grades, the rejections, the comparisons, the moments someone made you feel like too much or not enough. That place is still there. It has been waiting patiently for you to stop looking elsewhere." The person who needs no applause to feel worthy is untouchable, not because they're arrogant, but because they've found the only stable foundation that exists. The moment you stop needing someone to confirm your value is the moment you stop giving them the power to destroy it. Lesson 3. The word boundary has been so overused that it's almost lost its weight. People treat it like a preference, a mood, or a negotiating position, something flexible, something that bends when the relationship requires it. But the Stoics understood something far more precise and far less forgiving. A boundary, in the Stoic sense, isn't a fence you put up to keep people out. It's a standard you set to keep yourself intact. Epictetus was blunt about this. He understood that every time you allow someone to cross a line you've drawn, you aren't just tolerating their behavior. You are actively teaching them that the line doesn't mean anything. And once a standard has been demonstrated to be negotiable, it isn't a standard anymore. It's a suggestion. And people treat suggestions very differently than they treat standards. Think about someone in your life who commands genuine respect. Not the kind of respect that comes from fear or status. The quiet, deep kind. Chances are they have invisible lines you've never dared cross, not because they're cold or difficult, but because their consistency told you that crossing them would have real consequences. They didn't need to announce their standards. they simply lived them. That consistency is the key word here. A standard only functions as a standard when it's held, regardless of who is watching, regardless of how uncomfortable the moment becomes, and regardless of whether the other person understands or agrees with it. The moment you make an exception to avoid conflict, you've communicated something far louder than any speech you could have given. You've shown that your standard has a price, and now they know what it is. This doesn't mean rigidity. The Stoics weren't advocating for inflexibility as a virtue. There's a meaningful difference between compromising on logistics and compromising on character. You can adjust your schedule, change your plans, offer grace in a difficult moment. All of that is wisdom. But the moment a situation asks you to compromise your sense of self, your fundamental values, or your basic dignity, that is where the standard holds, without exception. Marcus Aurelius wrote that you should never esteem anything as of advantage to you that will make you break your word or lose your self-respect. Read that again slowly. He's saying, no relationship, no approval, no temporary peace is worth the price of your self-respect, not a single one. You don't need to make speeches or issue ultimatums. You don't need to explain your standards in exhaustive detail or defend them to people who will never honor them anyway. You just need to hold them, quietly, consistently, without apology. Standards aren't walls. They're the shape of who you are. Defend them like it. Lesson 4. Somewhere along the way, many of us learned a dangerous equation that staying silent means losing, that if you don't defend yourself, you've conceded, that you must respond to every provocation, justify every decision, and explain yourself to anyone who questions your choices. That silence is absence. That silence is surrender. The Stoics disagreed, fundamentally and without hesitation. Seneca wrote that one of the most powerful things a person can do is learn to be comfortable in their own silence. Not the silence of someone who has nothing to say, but the silence of someone who has decided that not everyone deserves access to your inner world. There is a version of restraint that isn't passive. It's precise. It knows exactly what it's choosing not to give away and why. Think about the last time someone provoked you, questioned your decisions, dismissed your perspective, or tried to drag you into an argument you didn't start. What did you feel? The pull to explain, to justify, to prove, to win. That pull is real and it's human, but notice what's underneath it. The belief that their opinion of you is powerful enough to require your immediate response. That if you stay quiet, they win. But here's what actually happens when you respond from that reactive place. You hand them the script. You let their words determine your actions. You become, in that moment, something Epictetus would recognize immediately, a person controlled by externals. And in handing them that control, you've confirmed the very thing they were testing, that your composure has a price, and they've found it. Silence, wielded with intention, is one of the most sophisticated tools in the Stoic arsenal. It communicates boundaries without aggression. It demonstrates self-control without coldness. It refuses to give energy to things that don't deserve it. And perhaps most importantly, it keeps your inner world yours, private, protected, untouched by whatever chaos someone else is trying to introduce. This takes practice, the urge to respond, to be understood, to correct the record. These are deeply human. You don't eliminate them. You learn to pause in the space between stimulus and response. Epictetus called that space freedom, because in that pause, you get to choose who you are rather than simply react to who they think you are. Marcus Aurelius rarely responded to public critics during his reign, not because he was indifferent, but because he understood something essential. A response dignifies the attack. You don't owe anyone a defense of your worth. The most powerful answer you can give to someone who underestimates you is the quiet, steady life you continue to build without their approval. Lesson 5. There is a seductive lie that social life tells you, that the more people who accept you, the more valuable you are. That belonging to the largest possible group, being liked by the widest possible audience, and causing the least possible friction is the goal. That palatability is the same thing as worth. That being easy to be around is the same thing as being someone worth being around. It isn't. And chasing that lie will cost you something you can't easily get back. Yourself. Epictetus was almost impatient about this. He wrote that if you want to improve, you must be willing to be thought foolish and stupid by those who are still choosing comfort over growth, the people who never ruffle feathers, who never risk disapproval, who always find a way to be palatable to everyone. They aren't living deeply. They're living widely, and there's a significant difference. Width is volume, depth is meaning, and a life of volume with no meaning is one of the quietest forms of emptiness there is. Depth requires specificity. It requires knowing what you actually believe, what actually matters to you, and being willing to stand in that truth, even when it alienates people who were never really aligned with you to begin with. This is uncomfortable, genuinely, persistently uncomfortable. Because not everyone will understand you. Some people will misread your boundaries as arrogance, your silence as coldness, your standards as rigidity, and the temptation will be to explain yourself, soften your edges, make yourself easier to digest. Resist that temptation. The friendships, the relationships, the opportunities that come from authentic self-expression, they are rare, but they are real, and real is worth more than many, because those connections don't require you to perform. They don't ask you to edit your thinking before you speak or curate your reactions for maximum approval. They simply meet you as you are and find that enough. Here's a reframe that might help you. The goal is not to be liked by everyone. It's to be known fully by a few. When you lower yourself to gain broader acceptance, you don't actually become more connected. You become more invisible. Because the version of you that people are accepting isn't you. It's a carefully curated performance of you, adjusted for maximum palatability. And you cannot feel truly seen when you're hiding the very thing that makes you worth seeing. Seneca described the person who chases universal approval as someone scattered in all directions. You cannot be everywhere and still be whole. Choose the depth of a real life over the width of a performed one. You'll lose some rooms, but you'll finally feel at home in your own skin. Lesson 6. This might be the hardest lesson of all 6, not because the logic is complicated, but because of what it requires emotionally. Letting go without explanation, leaving without making it a negotiation, walking away from people, situations, and dynamics that consistently ask you to be less than you are, and doing it without the weight of guilt following you out the door. The Stoics were clear on this. Not every connection deserves continuation. Not every room deserves your presence. And staying somewhere that diminishes you, out of loyalty, history, obligation, or fear of causing pain, is not nobility. It's self-neglect dressed in generous clothing. It looks like compassion from the outside, but from the inside, it feels like a slow erasure. Here's where this gets honest. Most of the guilt you feel when you walk away from something that isn't working isn't actually about the other person. It's about the story you've told yourself, about what staying means, and what leaving says about you. That you're loyal, that you don't give up, that you're someone who makes things work. And leaving in that story threatens the identity you've built around being the person who stays. Marcus Aurelius wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality, and that's precisely where guilt lives, in the imagination, in the story you construct about what your departure means, that you're selfish, that you're abandoning someone, that a good person would stay and make it work. But those stories are almost never accurate. They're the residue of years of being taught that your needs matter less than other people's comfort, that keeping others comfortable is a virtue, even when it comes at the cost of your own. Walking away, when it is the honest and necessary thing to do, is not cruelty, it is clarity. It is the recognition that you cannot pour from an empty vessel, that you cannot grow in soil that doesn't support your roots, and that every moment you spend in a dynamic that requires your self-betrayal is a moment stolen from a life that actually fits you. A life where you don't have to perform, shrink, or negotiate your worth at the door. Epictetus said, "Make the best use of what is in your power. Staying or leaving, that is yours. The narrative others construct around your departure, that is theirs. You are not responsible for managing the emotions of people who benefited from your smallness. Walk away, cleanly, quietly, without a speech, and without looking back for permission. Because nothing on the other side of that door is worth more than the person you become when you finally stop leaving pieces of yourself behind to keep others comfortable." 6 lessons. And if you felt something shift as you moved through them, even slightly, that shift is worth paying attention to. Here's what the Stoics weren't doing when they wrote these ideas down. They weren't writing self-help content. They weren't crafting motivational frameworks for people who needed a boost. They were writing survival guides. Marcus Aurelius wrote his Meditations privately, for himself, because even an emperor needed to be reminded daily that his worth was not determined by the approval of his court, the praise of his army, or the loyalty of his allies. He needed to remember that the only thing that could never be taken from him was his character, his choices, his inner standard. That's what you've been given today, not a technique, not a trick, a standard. The world will keep testing it. People will continue to appear in your life who, consciously or not, expect you to be smaller so they can feel larger. Situations will arise that seem to demand compromise of your voice, your values, your vision of yourself. And in those moments, the 6 lessons won't arrive like a checklist. They'll arrive like a quiet voice beneath the noise. What is actually in my control here? Does this require my response or my resolve? Am I honoring the person I've decided to be? Those questions are the practice, not a one-time decision, but a daily, deliberate return to yourself. Importance isn't something others hand you in a moment of generosity. It isn't earned through performance or perfected through people-pleasing. It's something you decide, quietly, privately, non-negotiably, and then defend with the consistency of your actions, the integrity of your silence, and the courage to walk away from anything that asks you to forget it. You were never meant to lower yourself for anyone. The Stoics knew it, and now, so do you. Don't just watch this. Live it. One standard, one boundary, one honest choice at a time. If something in this video cracked something open in you, let it. Drop a comment below. I hold my standard. Say it like you mean it, because you do. And if this is the kind of truth you want more of, subscribe to the Stoic Mode and turn on notifications. Because what we're building here is a life that doesn't bend for the wrong reasons. This is just the beginning. Thank you for being here. Walk tall,